Today, we cover off the most recent training camp headlines, including some big news at cornerback. We also look at the Packers' first official preseason depth chart and tell you what to read into and what is smoke.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm Kesha.
Welcome in another episode of Sounds Gouda. Thanks everybody for coming back and taking a listen to us. I am Rob. Next to me is my best friend Jordan. We are excited to talk Packers ball with you each and every week. Know that we are on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. New episodes every Wednesday and Saturday. But we are still running a promo. Every new 50 subscribers, you do have to be public. We'll get some free Sounds Gouda swag sent to you, and the next tier up on that list will be 600. So, yeah, look out for that. Make sure that you're a public subscriber. Jordan, let's start off with this. Since the last time I talked, we did have a family night. We all know that that's quite the tradition up there in Green Bay. What were some of your key takeaways, thoughts, and insights from family night?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the scrimmage, even though I heard that it was streamed. I was at a friend's wedding in Minnesota and traveled over the weekend, so I kind of had to live through Twitter and some articles and things like that. But, a couple things that I read, a couple things that I've heard, and seen some clips of, in general, the offense sound like they struggled. Particularly the first team, more of a defensive night on family night. I know that the defensive side of the ball was highlighted by Omar Brown, which had, I believe, 3 interceptions on the night and really was the star of the show. We can spend a minute, I can ask you in a second here, what you think that means for his potential bid for a roster spot. I would say in general, the offense probably struggled a little bit because, Matt LaFleur probably didn't want to put a whole lot of special stuff on tape. A lot of it was probably base stuff, pretty vanilla zone run reads, things like that. So, and you don't expect them ever on a family night to come and start running trick plays and really push all their chips in onto the table to try to win an inter-squad practice. One other note that I'll put out there, and then I'll kind of let you throw your stuff out there. It's pretty well noted that without Rasheed Walker playing, that the tackles really struggled at family night, including Jordan Morgan, Anthony Belton, and Kadeem Telfort. So that's maybe a good segue for you. I know that Jordan Morgan, you and I were just talking in the pre-pod, and you noted that Jordan Morgan got schooled by LVN on a play, but what do you make of that, Rob?
I mean, he's gonna take his lumps. Wasn't his best night, that's for sure. Neither of the tackles' best night. I don't know if that, double-edged sword, good for the defense, maybe bad for the offense, right? But not trying to put anything incredible out there for play calls, as you were alluding to. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you feel like Morgan is the backup tackle to Rasheed Walker? If that's the case, you can either kind of see it two ways as growth and development for Jordan Morgan and kind of taking his lumps as any kind of person in that situation would, especially in their second year, or two, Lucas Van Ness, as all camp reports are trying to put out there, that he's starting to put it all together, or at least put some technicality to his pass rush sets. I will say the one that I did see Morgan get schooled on, it was pretty much just a bull rush. He bull rushed him right back into the pocket too. So it was nothing that was like too crazy or nothing we haven't seen from Van Ness before. Just overall in general, I thought family night was definitely dominated by the defense. Not even just Omar Brown, but Kalen King, Carrington Ballentine ended up having an interception. So love to see that the defense is rounding into form. It was cool to see Golden out there running some routes, even though I think he got overthrown on a pass or two. So that was kind of cool to see some, quote unquote live reps as far as that goes. But yeah, those are kind of some of my overall just brief thoughts from family night.
Yeah, and Omar Brown has a long hill to climb still. I mean, there's really good safeties on this roster. He's not going to overtake, McKinney, Williams, or even Bullard probably on the depth chart, right? So at best, he's pushing for safety spot 4. I know we'll talk a little bit about the snap counts here, but Katano Oladapo is still, I think, well, I'll go jump into that. I think Oladapo still had, one snap with the first team. So, even you look at the first team reps from that night, Omar Brown had 3 interceptions, but those were all with the second or third team at that point in time. So, by snap count indication, and there's a pretty strong history that first team reps in the preseason have a pretty good correlation with making this roster. Omar Brown is at best safety 4, but he's going to have to compete with Zane Anderson for that spot and really show that he can play special teams as well. But there's a pretty considerable age difference between Omar Brown and Zane Anderson, so that could definitely be a camp battle to watch moving forward in the next couple of weeks. So a couple other snap count things of note is that, Javon Bullard pretty much played extensively in the slot with the ones with Hobbs out. We're going to get to the Hobbs injury here in a minute. But, Keyshawn Nixon and Carrington Ballentine played a lot of outside corner. A couple of Bo Melton, Kalen King snaps mixed in with the ones, but those were 2 snaps for Bo Melton, for Kalen King. A couple of other snap things of note. Tyron Hopper really doesn't seem to have a footing with the ones, but did take a couple of first team snaps with 4. Let's see here. Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt really seemed to take a lion's share of the first team snaps there, with mixing in a little Carl Brooks, Colby Wooden, Warren Brinson, and Nazir Stackhouse. Without Rasheed Walker, really all of the first team snaps went to Jordan Morgan, Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, Zach Tom, and Anthony Belton along the offensive line. John Fitzpatrick outsnapped Ben Sims 11 snaps to 2. So there may be some early indication about where that, tight end room is shaking out in terms of depth. We still have a really long camp to go. And then I did find it fascinating, most of the other stuff kind of checks out, but Malik Heath was second on the team in first team snaps on family night. Matthew Golden had 27. Malik Heath had 22 first team snaps, followed by Romeo Dobbs' 21, Cole Hardman's 11, and Jaden Reed's 10. So, Malik Heath at this point in time is out snapping McCole Hardman. And we also are going to talk about the depth chart here in a minute. And kind of how things shake out. But I think McCole Hardman has some work to do to make this roster, despite having a lot of splash plays in training camp so far. So I don't know. Rob, you make anything out of those snap counts, or you kind of good on that right now? So
Yeah, I'm good on that. Just testing some things out. I don't really put too much into that.
Yeah. Tell us about the Nate Hobbs injury. I've been busy and we got on here. We started talking about that. You were giving me some updates. Obviously a pretty unfortunate situation about where we're at with Nate Hobbs right now.
Yeah, well, Mr. Aggressor himself, obviously he's had quite the injury history, similar to Jair Alexander, which I think made us all kind of concerned for the cornerback depth and the way we kind of went in the draft and whatnot. But that's all behind us. So anyways, he got injured on Friday, the torn meniscus, and ended up having his knee scoped on Saturday. Of course, beat writers are going to ask Matt LaFleur about it, and he's not going to give too much up, but there's not a timeline for return. I'm hoping soon. No idea what that means. Hopefully by week 1, week 2, maybe week 3 at the latest. I don't know. Definitely not a doctor here, so I'm gleaning a little bit. But this is exactly the kind of concern that we all had, right? So this leaves, Nixon, Valentine, and Bullard, along with, Haddon and Kalen King, I would assume. Micah Robinson in there probably as well for that other cornerback depth piece. But I really hope that this is the first and last time this year, for sure. Otherwise, just, like everyone has predicted, your cornerback depth is going to be tested. So that's why we're kind of hoping to get a little bit more ammunition to be able to get a higher draft pick or 2 in that. So definitely hurts. I love his play style for sure, what he brings to the team, but with his play style too comes injuries when you're willing to step up in the box and be a willing tackler. So yeah, it sucks for sure. It's not good news to wake up to. I'll remain rationally optimistic that I'll be ready to go for the season, but definitely have my concerns. I don't honestly, I'd be dumb to think that this will be the last time the season I don't know. Jordan, what are your thoughts on what this means for the Packers?
I mean, I think it means that Nixon, Ballentine, and Bullard are your corners, your starting corners, including, Bullard in the slot on week 1. I'm not a doctor. I'm never going to pretend to be. I'd imagine that you're probably at least a month out to get him right and to get him feeling good about this. And I don't think the Packers, with the investment that they had just made in him, are going to try to rush him back. That's part of the reason why they went and got this procedure done right now. They said that he might have even said, and I think his presser, that, I could have gone out and I could have played through this. It was described as a little bit of a cleanup. So, but I think the team doctors and Matt LaFleur and Hobbs are all going to be pretty cautious, because it's going to be a lot more important to have him in December and January than it's going to be in week 1 or week 2. So, yeah, we'll see. In other news, I mean, maybe related, maybe unrelated, but bring back a familiar face in Corey Ballentine. So again, we got to get into the pronunciation game and make sure that if we're saying Valentine with a V or Ballentine with a B. Because I'm from Wisconsin and I've got an accent, you probably still heard the same thing there. But Corey Ballentine, number 35, is back with the team. He's mostly been working with the second and third string, and my understanding is I think it's a really nice little depth signing, especially if we do have Hobbs on the injured list to start the season. But there's a pretty good chance that right now Corey Ballentine might be the 4th or 5th peer best corner on this roster. It makes it a little bit harder for Micah Robinson to make this roster, makes it a little bit harder for Kalen King to make this roster, a little bit harder for Bo Melton to make it as a corner. But I like it. I guess thank you, Indianapolis Colts, for cutting him loose and giving him a chance to come back to Green Bay. So do you think that Corey Ballentine probably makes this roster as like corner 5 at this point in time?
Absolutely. Not only that, he provides really good special teams value too as well. So especially with the Hobbs injury, no, there is no doubt in my mind Corey Ballentine makes this team.
Yeah, and I think just on the defensive back front and talking, we're going to spend more time in the upcoming weeks following kind of every game, giving a little bit of a 53-man roster update with what we saw in those games and where we're at. I definitely think right now that with Hobbs potentially starting the season on the injured list, maybe they only keep 5 corners, or if they count Javon Bullard as a corner, maybe they only keep 4 safeties at that point in time. It is going to be a numbers game to keep wide receivers, these defensive ends, linebackers, even other players that can play special teams. So we'll see how that shakes out. Speaking of transactions, the Packers did sign back Lectus Smith. It kind of came at the cost of a guy I was pulling for quite a bit, and Sam Brown Jr., who the Packers waived with an injury designation. So I don't know. What do you make of that signing, Rob, of adding some interior offensive line depth back? And do you think this is the last we've seen of Sam Brown Jr., despite some good reports early from him in camp?
Yeah, I've heard the good things about him in camp, no doubt. Definitely a little bit of hype to him, but the wide receiver room and depth is just a little too stacked for me to make it. So I don't think that we see him again. I don't know too much about Lectus Smith. He was a center. I think that they're just bringing it in for competition. I think maybe there's a chance he can make practice squad, but to be honest, I'll have to see Lectus Smith play a little bit more and get some tape on him before I give more of a complete analysis of what he is on the team. So right now, I would say they're offloading one with knowing that he probably wouldn't make the roster to insert another, talented player. Maybe that's got a little bit more of a shot to have some practice squad in him. So
yeah, I mean, I think Lectus Smith's ceiling's a practice squad player with an emergency, call up situation on a game day. If you have, Elton Jenkins hurt and, somebody like, Jacob Monk dinged up, or, counting Sean Ryan, already filling in at center, and now you need another interior offensive lineman. So, he was on the Packers practice squad last year, somebody who has familiarity in the system. And I don't think this will be the end for Sam Brown conversation in Green Bay. I just have a strange feeling that he's going to end up back on the practice squad at some point in time when he's healthy. And maybe we won't talk about him again until the 2026 offseason. But I just have a strange feeling that this won't be the last conversation we have about Sam Brown Jr. But, hopefully you get healthy and maybe we'll see you again. So speaking of other wide receivers, we couldn't have a Packers podcast without talking about Sterling Sharpe going into the Hall of Fame. I know that we had a little bit of a tribute or some conversation when it was announced that he would be a Hall of Fame player, but, a clear generational talent. His career was obviously cut short a little bit by a neck injury. If you poll just about any Packers fan who was old enough to remember, Sterling Sharpe might have been the most athletically gifted Packers wide receiver that we've ever had on a roster. And obviously we've had some good wide receivers. So, Rob, were you able to take in any clips or anything that he said from his speech? And what are your thoughts about adding another member of the Packers to the Hall of Fame?
Well overdue. Absolutely. Like we said from before, a few clips here and there. Obviously, you make it to that stage and you get to be in the Hall of Fame. It's filled with a lot of insights and gratitude, intentional gratitude for that matter. So, him to be able to share that stage with Shannon Sharpe, his brother, was really cool. And I loved what I was hearing too, and to hear a little bit more about some of his family and some of the other people that are, a little bit closer to him and how they impacted his life. So, um, pretty pretty cool to hear a little bit more about that. And obviously great, for the Packers to be able to add another talented player into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I already had too many jerseys in my closet, but I try not to buy a new one every year, but I'm kind of on the cycle to get another one. I bought a Jordan Love a couple years ago. I'm really having a hard time deciding right now if I want to buy a Sterling Sharpe throwback or, go all in on like a Tucker Craft, 1923 retro coming out. But, I do love Sterling's game, and he was a fun player to watch. So congratulations, Sterling Sharpe. You were a great Packer, and you were a lot of fun to watch highlights of. So kind of last thing we're going to do, the Packers did release their first official depth chart. And I believe that we have this via Twitter or X from Rob Demoski. Is that right, Rob?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, you can read as little or as much as you would like to into these depth charts, but I do think there are a few telling things in where players are listed, kind of how they put this together from the team's perspective. But Rob, what were some of the things that you've noticed on the offensive depth chart as we look through this official team depth chart from the Packers?
Well, the offensive line was basically how I thought it would be week one. Walker, Banks, Jenkins, Ryan, Tom. Golden is listed in there too, behind Jaden Reed, but he's still, one of the top three receivers. Marshawn Lloyd, listed back here at 3. He can't seem to stay healthy. And then they got Isaiah McDuffie too. I know we talked about a little bit about that, but at least in your base, he's in there for your starters for Isaiah McDuffie, Walker, Edrin Cooper. I think that's some of the ones that stood out to me initially.
Yeah, go back up. And if you're watching along on YouTube, we have the graphic up. So, like you said, not surprised that they listed the Packers starters, Rasheed Walker, Aaron Banks, Elton Jenkins, Sean Ryan, and Zach Tom across the offensive line. I do think that depth chart is a little telling. On the next 5 up, so Jordan Morgan, Donovan Jennings, Jacob Monk, Travis Glover, and Anthony Belton are the next 5. So given that, you think that they're going to keep 10 guys, those are the guys that are going to be on this roster. It puts Kadeem Telford on the outside looking in, probably a cut I highly doubt with trying to, keep as many wide receivers and other positions of need they have, or guys they want to retain for roster building purposes. I kind of doubt they're going to keep 11 offensive linemen. Tyler Cooper, Alexis Smith, JJ Lippy, a lot of those guys are probably going to the practice squad, but they do have John Fitzpatrick listed over the top of Ben Sims and Messiah Swinson right now, and Johnny Lumpkin. I would think that some of the other things that we've talked about would also, kind of be in agreement with that listing. I think that they have, the wide receiver depth chart is a little bit interesting to read into, though. If you took the top 6 from this depth chart, it would go Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, McCole Hardman, Malik Heath, and Matthew Golden, with Savion Williams listed as the 7th wide receiver. So we know that Savion Williams, unless it's due to injury designation, is going to be on this roster. So either they're planning to keep 7, or there's gonna be more shaken up at that position moving forward. I also thought it was interesting to note that Brenton Cox Jr. was safely listed as kind of edge number 3 right now. We've talked about Kingsley Enagbare potentially being a cut candidate. We haven't talked about that a lot on the show, but I know that some other shows have talked about it. We've talked about Colby Wooden being a cut candidate, but he's safely listed in the top 4 at this point in time. Kamal Haddon is listed at the 4th corner on this team right now, true corner, because they don't have a slot designation in this 4-3 base model. I guess one other note is that we kind of talked about that McCole Hardman is going to have to show up on special teams to have a spot on this roster. Right now, he's listed at 3rd on the punt return depth chart, and 2nd is kick returner. So I really feel like he's going to have to win a starting role in one of those spots to crack this roster. But I don't know. There's a lot of preseason, and this is just a lot of kind of fun conversation at this point in time. So I did have one more thought about McCole Hardman, though, and the value that he could bring this team. And I really see a lot of similarities in McCole Hardman to Matthew Golden. I think we'd all like to believe that Matthew Golden has a little bit higher upside or ceiling than McCole Hardman based on draft pedigree and things like that. But just watching McCole Hardman kind of be a master of accelerating and decelerating and changing his speed in and out of breaks, like, I think that that's really the type of movement that they're going to want Matthew Golden to accentuate in his young career and really become a master of throttling up and down and when to use that supreme speed. And I kind of wonder if there's not some additional value in keeping McCole Hardman around as a 7th wide receiver, a 6th wide receiver, just to work with guys like Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed and kind of give them a year of development in that, because, he's been a high-end number 3 receiving option on some really good Super Bowl teams. So he's definitely got some experience to share.
Yeah, absolutely. He's won Super Bowls. He's a veteran. He's kind of that speedster gadget, which Matthew Golden will definitely get a lot of value out of. So, yeah, mentorship for sure would add a lot of value for Golden, I think.
All right, folks. Well, that's all we've got for you tonight. Quick Brewers update. Did the Cubs end up losing that game, Rob? You got a final on that? Because if the Cubs lost, the Brewers won again tonight as we record this on Tuesday night. So the Brewers are going to be 4 games up in the division, which is awesome.
4 games up officially, yep.
Yeah. So injury bugs hitting the Brewers a little bit. Hopefully Cheerio and Mizorowski are back off the IL soon, but that doesn't seem to be slowing the Brewers down. So definitely Go Brew Crew. But more great Packers content for you every Wednesday and Saturday. We're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Make sure to comment, let us know what you think. Connect with us on X. Rob's at Sounds Gouda with 3 A's, and I am at Olson George. So until next time, Packers Nation, have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Go Pack.
Been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better.